I am your host, Justin Yachts, and today my guest is William Grefé. This is part two of my interview with him. He is a famous director from the 60s and the 70s. Enjoy.
So what else?
All right, let's well, now we're at the Hook generation, which I really loved this film. I thought this was a really interesting film. I really love the water scene that you did when you'd had the girl's head
Uh,
drowning, and then and then the last shot. I didn't know that you actually just held the camera and he just held his breath under there going down. And I thought it was very poetic that he dies by his own stuff.
yeah. Well, it's yeah, that movie turned out, I think you know who John Davis Chandler is. John
Yeah.
Chandler, and Outlaw Josie Wales, he plays
Yeah.
the bounty hunter. But
He's in Mako,
I,
Jaws
you
of
know,
Death. He's worked with you a lot.
yeah, well, Johnny, I thought Hook Generation was the best thing Johnny ever did as an actor.
Mhm.
And you really study his performance, the way he played that,
Yeah.
drug addict and all that. Johnny did a favor that is unheard of in California. Uh, I was doing Whiskey Mountain up in North Carolina, and I originally cast Neville Bryan. Do you remember Neville Bryan? Anyway, he was a
In
well, and
yeah,
anyway, he
maybe.
was going to play the part that Johnny ended up with because Neville Bryan was well known in Europe at the time, and so his agent calls me and that he got pneumonia and he couldn't show up and had to cancel. And here I'm producing and directing, and I'm out in the woods, and so a PA comes out with a note from my secretary and said, Neville Bryan can't show up. He was due in 2 days. So I said, call Johnny Chandler and tell him I can't send him a round trip ticket. I can't send him an advance because actors always want to advance in the first ticket. I said, I need him they're here tomorrow. And Johnny trusted me and showed up, and so Johnny was great. I really liked working with him.
What was he like to work with acting wise, like directing him? Did you?
Well, Johnny had so much experience, he really didn't need
Yeah.
directing. But I remember one thing I did direct him on is at the end of the movie where he comes in, and remember the two girls had been raped.
Oh, at the in Whiskey Mountain. Yeah.
When the two girls had been raped, well, I told Johnny, I said, Johnny, look, you come in, really mean, mad as hell, and he kicks the other guy, and he comes up to the girl, and then I want you to be sympathetic to see what they went through. Gee, thanks for that, Bill. That's going to work. That's great. And so he thanked me for that bit of direction. Some of these really experienced actors, you don't have to direct them
Yeah.
much. Anyway, one thing, pro knows all the tricks like when you're doing a two shot, you
Yeah.
know, if this actor, if you turn that way, well, then you get the back of the head, the other actor. And when I was doing Impulse, we had Shatner was doing a scene with some unknown actor, and they're doing the two shot, and Shatner leans, so the other guy, you see it practically the back of his head. So I said, cut, and I said, Bill, come over here. I didn't tell him. I said, give the kid a break, will you? All right. He knew exactly what I was talking about. I didn't have to tell him, I said, give the kid a break. So,
It's
so
just like,
the,
oh,
the old
somebody
pros,
else.
they know every trick in the book.
Now back to the Hook generation. you also had this actress that you brought on who had some kind of a name or whatever, but you ended up having to fire her because she was and giving giving her lines away. What was the story of that?
Oh, well, this gal, she had two. She was to film 2 days.
Yeah.
She shows up. She wasn't a star or anything. She was just an actor. She shows up in a limousine and all of this, and she was a prima donna. She gave me all kind of trouble. I mean, she was unbelievable. And so there's a scene at the when she's on the staircase and all this, where the guy is there, and so she was to film another whole day, but I knew I had her last shot the first day. I said to her, I said, "Thank you very much. You're fired." What are you going to do? And I just sat down and I rewrote that thing with Johnny Chandler and all, where he comes out. I just gave that to that other girl, and nobody knew the difference. And one thing I never did put up with was prompt honest, because it's hard enough to make a movie without somebody giving you the star treat.
Especially somebody who has 2 lines. It's like, what are we doing here? I also like the marketing that you did for Hook Generation. You guys put them in these capsules and handed them out to school. Like, I could never see that being done today. People would be like, "Oh my God, you're promoting drugs."
Little capsules, get hooked on the Hook Generation, playing at your local theater. And we'd go by the high schools and the colleges and throw out hundreds of these capsules, So,
and I'm sure it worked because people are like,
those days are long, the way we used to promote movies.
One thing I thought was really, you've got the shot where Willie is getting struck with the snake. How'd you shoot that?
Well, I used the real rattlesnake, but on the actual strike, I had a stuffed snake, real snake, but it was dead. So I, did real fast cut, would hit him and all that, and then would cut to the real snake and all that. But when I did, do you want to talk about Stanley and all?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're gonna get to Stanley. I have a lot to talk about Stanley.
Something with Stanley when we get to Stanley. So
yeah, I'm fascinated. All right, so let's get to let's talk about the Naked Zoo, which I think is one of your most underrated films. Because I really enjoyed it. I thought it was different from all the other stuff that I had watched. Can you talk a little bit about coming up with it? I mean, I know you talked about what was it, Coconut Grove? Like it kind of came.
Well, Coconut Grove at that time was sort of the hippie area of Miami, So I wanted to do, because the hippie stuff was all the rage back then. So so anyway, I originally had titled it The Grove, but a lot of people didn't know what the Grove stood for, so we ended up. Stephen Oliver, had his own. He was a star of that TV show, and sent him the script, and he liked it, and then I told you how I got Rita Hayworth for the part. But anyway, Rita Hayworth was from the old school, and I'm used to 1 or 2 takes,
Yeah.
So I put in my budget where I'd do 6 or 7 takes. So the first day I'd do 6 or 7, and then the second day, I'd do 4 or 5 takes. And finally, once she got confidence in me, then I was down to 1 or 2 takes, you know.
Yeah.
So that's
Did you sense a reluctance that she trusted you as a director when you first met her or when you were first working with her?
well, I met her at her home. She lived next to what was his name? Anyway, she moved next to some famous actor, uh,
Mm.
but she had looked at Hook Generation with her agent, you know, and you know they sort of knew that's what was happening today. But she was getting Alzheimer's at the time. And we didn't know what Alzheimer's was, and
Mm.
uh, uh, so I thought she was an alcoholic, and she would let me. I had to film around her for 4 days, 4 or 5 days, which was a nightmare. Where
Yeah.
she was in her hotel room and couldn't work and this and that. So it was a tough thing, you know, because now, you know, Alzheimer's is really well known, you know, disease, but back then, you know, she was starting to lose it a little bit mentally at that time. So anyway, but she was a, you know, good trooper. You know, she was
Yeah.
and she was scared to death of being in an automobile because she had 2 friends that had been killed. Ali Khan, I think, was
Her husband.
killed, and
Mm.
my poor wife was driving her one time, and like a guy, she literally fell on the floor.
Comparing it to like what was there something different about Rita Hayworth that you noticed when you were directing, working with her? That like
She was sort of a timid. She was sort of timid gal. She wasn't, you know, like Ruth Roman. You know, where I use Ruth Roman had kahunas as big as an elephant. You know, she was a tough
yeah.
gal. You know, where Rita was very sort of timid type. You know, she wasn't you know, she wasn't a temperamental or anything, but
Mm.
the Alzheimer's was starting to
Yeah.
catch up with her, which was a sad thing.
What am I I really loved Stephen Oliver in this movie. I thought
Yeah,
he played an interesting role where he's like
yeah, he
this
was.
writer, but he's kind of a jerk, but he's this, but we kind of feel for him. Like he, you know, he's going through this whole gambit of emotions and stuff. What was Stephen Oliver like to work with?
He was good working with him, and but the trouble was he was a little on drugs during that movie, and I had to get after him, you
Oh
know,
no.
and so I took him aside and I said, "Look, it's showing up, you know, so you got to be careful, you know, you can't come
Yeah.
on the things stoned and think nobody's gonna notice it, you know." So uh, uh,
It's amazing. Anybody could, you know, it's like I don't know how you could act high. I guess some can.
yeah,
So like when you gave him when you gave him this talk, was he did he understand or was he kind of denying that he was high?
that he was what?
Did he deny that there was anything wrong with him?
No, 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 no.
So so he understood what was going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Um one of the I mean, you've talked about the alternate cut and how they added stuff. I why do you think as I think this movie could have done better than it did. Do you think it was just the way it was marketed or released or the
Well,
changing of it?
what the deal was they had tax shelters. That
Mm.
movie was made on, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but if you invested in a movie, a lot of people wanted write-offs,
Yeah.
and the investors were all tax shelter people. And that's why the first thing it didn't go over. So the people sold it to another group, and the other group said, oh, you got to put the canned heat in, you got to put this and that, some nude scenes and, stuff in this, which I didn't like, So,
Yeah. And then they actually retitled. They like tried several different things. Let me restate that. Did he so they really just kind of intended this movie to not do well.
correct. They,
Do you
yeah,
do you think it was a mistake to go with them as investors? Like if you could do
well,
it again, or
at the time, I didn't know that was their intent.
yeah.
I would have never, gone with them if I knew that was the intent of the thing. But
So they sabotaged it basically.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
kind of
right,
what happened.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I know. I really liked it. I thought I just thought it was just so different, and the way you
Oh,
filmed it was different. This was more of, as opposed to a lot of it was more of a talking film, and really
I'll tell
liked
you
it.
something interesting about that. The the associate producer, I was producing and directing, and in pre-production, we were going to rent all of the furniture for that set. That his house was a set we built at a studio, and so his job was to rent all of this furniture. So I forget the exact number, but he was going to rent the whole thing for like $1,000, and so we're going to shoot Monday, and Saturday the guy comes by to get his money, and he said it's going to be $5,000. I said the deal is 1,000.
Yeah.
So I said to the guy that was supposed to make the deal for me, I said, "Where's the contract? Let me see." Well, I didn't get a contract, Bill. And I said to the guy, I got 2 words for you. And the first word starts with an F, and the second word starts with a U. Everybody panicked. What are we going to do? This and that. So I got the whole crew together, and I said, you bring in a lamp, you bring in your kitchen table, the whole thing. We did the whole thing.
That's similar to what had happened on the Hook generation. The pretty girl there, she said she would do a nude scene, and then when you got to the nude scene, she was like, "Well, I don't want to do it now."
Oh yeah, I had to bring in a double for that.
It's like, come on, just do the nude scene.
So that back scene of her was a double. Remember where she?
So this brings us now, you kind of leave the business for a while. You become the production head at Ivan Tor's studio, and they did like Gentle Ben and Flipper, and you get the Psychedelic Priests. Now I'm confused. Did you, because you wanted to do the Psychedelic Priests and then you were eventually going to do Stanley, is that why you left? Did you leave Ivan's, or were you still doing
Psychedelic
it?
Priest done prior to me becoming president of Ivan Tours. See, so when I became president, Ivan Tours was noted for family stuff, Flipper, Gentleman, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't want to be associated with a hippie drug related film.
Okay, okay. Oh,
So
I
that's
see what
why I
happened.
didn't take director's credit. You
Yeah, you're
follow?
just
So I just took cameraman credit,
photographer.
Incidentally, I
Yeah.
shot that with 3 people. I did all the camera work on it. I had a sound man and one. I'll tell you an interesting story on that. The producer was completely nuts, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, nuts. And so the way he calls me up, he calls me on the phone. He said, Billy, I got this great script I want to do. And I said, well, what's it about? He said, well, it's about this priest that leaves the church and travels. So anyway, he says, jump on a plane out here. I want you to direct this thing. And I said, well, it doesn't quite work this way. I said, you send me half my salary and a round trip ticket and I'll come out. So a week or 2 later, round trip ticket comes and half my salary. So I go out and he meets me at the airport and he wouldn't send me the script, but he told me the basic concept of it. And I said, come on, take me to my hotel room. I want to read the script. I'm in trouble, Grefé. I don't have a script. What? You brought me out here. You don't have a script. Anyway, long story short, we're sitting around and he had put this deal together with trading stamps. Nobody knows what trading stamps were, but back then it was a way sort of to beat the IRS. And like if you owned a TV shop and you had trading stamps and I owned a garage and you needed your transmission, instead of paying me, you'd give me trading stamps and then I could go buy a TV off of you with trading stamps. So some way he'd raise these trading stamps. So anyway, we're sitting there and we're at the Ramada Inn on Sunset. And if you've ever eaten every meal at the Ramada Inn, so after a couple of days sitting there doing nothing and running around, I said, look, let's go over to the New World and I'll buy dinner. So we went up across the street and there was that hippie girl, with the long dress. She was sitting there. And I said, she looks like a real hippie, And he says, I know why I hired you, Grefé. You're brilliant. He goes over, you want to star in my next movie? So now we got our lead and she'd never acted before. The next morning we're having breakfast at the Ramada.
So how
did
the lead of the psychedelic priest had he acted before?
He'd never been in a movie before. You're talking about the guy who played the priest, right?
Yeah, the one that goes through. Yeah.
Oh, well, how that happened? We were having breakfast at the Ramada Inn the next morning, and he walks in, and he had one of those briefcases where they show all your photographs and your resume and all. I said, that actor looks like a young priest. Grefé, you're brilliant. He goes over. Now we got our lead, And,
over there. You look like you've acted. Come on in.
So anyway, we used to just like Topanga Canyon was right off of Mulholland there, and we'd be riding around. Well, there's a nice stream down there. Let's dream up something to shoot on the stream and see where at the stream. And then I said, I've always, being from Florida, I like to see snow up at Lake Arrowhead. It's snowing. Why don't we go up to Lake Arrowhead? We winged all of that. I just, this is interesting now. We're riding down Sunset. See, all the hippies were living in the hills and they were in doorways and all that. So we had a handheld area and we were shooting all the hippies walking around on Sunset there. And this producer says, Rita is calling me. And I said, Rita's calling you? Who the hell's Rita? And he said, oh, she's a real witch. I'm talking, she's the real McCoy. I find out later that she had 5 pages in Esquire magazine about Lita, the witch, you know. So
Yeah.
he says, Lita's calling me. So we go up into the hills, and she lived in this castle in the hills, and we knock on the door, and it was me, the producer, our old sound man, and this young hippie grip we had. Anyway, this big guy comes to the door. What do you want? We're here to see Rita. Wait here. And so we're staying in. Rita comes and she looks at the producer. You're putting off bad vibes today. She looks at me. Oh, you're putting off good vibes. Okay, you two come in. She comes in, leaves the sound man and the young hippie outside, you know. So she's on this throne. She's got these big peacock feathers and she's sitting on this throne. This little guy comes in with a silver tray. Tea is served. And I said, what the hell's in this tea? So I'm sitting there drinking it. So after about 15, 20 minutes, I said, you know, it's hot outside. And that's our other people are there. And so she brings in, and this young kid, now this is where she had some magic power. This young kid comes jiving in, wow, what a cool place. You know, this, and she says, sit. Some way she hypnotized him and froze him right in their tracks, and boom. He just sat there paralyzed the whole damn meeting. So she had some kind of, but
This sounds like something out of a film. You should have filmed this.
So somebody looked that article up and they found it, that 5 pages in Esquire magazine. So I don't know if you could find it, but it's an interesting thing. But she had something, I don't know what it was, but that was a wild experience, I'll tell you.
I mean, what was it like directing actors who don't have a script and have not really acted before? Like, how would you, what would you just give them action direction or?
Well, you know, directing actors is, you know, hitting marks and all is one thing, you know, and then, you know, there's a lot of tricks like when you're doing over shoulder shots, you can't jump on someone's line because you got to take a little pause. And so I had to teach them, you know, give them a little teaching lesson on stuff like that, you know, but we just sit there and, yeah, well, let's talk about this. And we just, but, you know, that scene outside and they have the
doctor?
No, the one scene I'm really proud of in that movie is I'd become president of Ivan Tours, and the producer called me up, Bill, we don't have enough time. Please fly up on a weekend. I'll pay you. We got to film this. So I went out to LA and we were out in the desert, and I dreamt up a thing where these hippies are there and this girl is gonna have a baby. And so we went out in the desert and those were real hippies. And do you remember the scene where the girl has the baby?
In the car?
Yeah, in the car. I shot that whole scene in 15 or 20 minutes. I did all the camera work, and we dreamt that scene up, and that girl was a real hippie, and they were all real hippies. If you look at them, I shot that whole thing because I had to get the red eye back to Miami that night, to report to the studio. And I'm really proud of that scene. If you look at that scene, the way I covered it and shot it, and had real hippies that had never acted before. I mean, it turned out pretty good.
That was only 15 to 20 minutes. Wow.
Yeah.
Man, you knew how to not waste time, which is something you need to instill in the younger generation.
One thing that if you ever watched that thing they did, Randy Gretner, one of the guys worked with me, said, "Rain, nothing stopped Grefé."
Yeah, Chris George talks about that. He didn't show up the set on Whiskey Mountains. It was raining, and you're like, you're not on a John Wayne picture. You're in a William Grefé picture. Get out.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
So this brings us now to Stanley. So are you still, when you do Stanley, are you still Ivan Tors? Are you still doing the head of production, or are you?
Yeah.
Did you leave?
What happened, see, my deal, when I became president of the studio, I came home, because they interviewed me, the whole thing. And I said, my wife said, "Well, how'd you do it?" "I got the job." Why are you so depressed?" I said, "I got to go to work every morning at 9:00, because in the movie business, you work your ass off 14, 15 hours a day, but when it's over with, you can relax. But I had to go to work, and so I was depressed that I became. But when I took the job, I said, I've got to do one independent film a year on my own, and I'll give Ivan first crack at it,
Yeah.
And Stanley.
He's not going to do Stanley.
Stanley was not exactly a kid-oriented movie, so he turned it down, and that's the way I got Stanley. It was interesting. Do you want to talk about Stanley now?
Yeah, we're at Stanley. Let's talk about it.
Well, right then, the big thing, I was out in LA, and Willard, was a big independent film and did real well. And I knew if you're the second film out, you'll make money.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the fourth or fifth or sixth, you're not going to make money. So I don't know what the hell I ate that night, but I dreamt Stanley. And the next morning, Crown International had signed, had bought Wild Rebels from me. And so the head of that was an old crusty guy with a cigar out to here. And forgot his name right offhand. But anyway, I called him up and said, "Hey, I got an idea for a movie, He said, "Okay, well, send me the script. I'll read it over the weekend." I said, "I don't have a script." "Well, send me a resume." I said, "Well, I don't have a Get the hell off the phone." I said, "Please." So I went to see him. Red Jacobs was his name. Red Jacobs.
Yeah.
And so I went to see Red, and he smoked these big cigars out to here, He had a big box of cigars on it. He said, "What in the hell you bothered me for?" And I said, "Let me tell you the story." So he brought in his head of vice president and the head of publicity, and here, when they were waiting for them to come in, I reached in his box and grabbed one of his cigars. "Those damn things cost $1 a piece," which was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
Let down, They said, I said, relax, Fred. Come on, relax. So I told him the whole story because it was all in my head. And he said, how much will you make this movie for? And I said, $125,000. You got a deal. I knew a handshake with Red Jacobs was as good as a contract. He says, I'm going to put one monkey on your back. I got to have this movie by April 15th, which was the magic day drive-ins open around the country.
Yeah.
And here it was almost just starting December, and I had no script or anything. So I wasn't about to turn the deal down, but I knew I had to start shooting almost immediately, you know. So I wouldn't turn the deal down. Okay, Gary Crutcher, he's the wild writer I know. And Gary was a pill popper. The first time I met him, he had a briefcase with uppers and downers, and he had a 45 automatic, and he was like completely nuts, you know. So I said, Gary Crutcher, I said, Gary, meet me at the LA airport. I got to take the next red eye back to Miami. So he met me on the airport, and I took a yellow pad and I wrote down all of the characters. And scene one, this happens, blah, blah, blah. So I wrote everything down. And this was a Friday night. I said, Gary, I have to have a screenplay Monday in Miami. Well, there were no faxes, there were no emails or anything, which means he had to finish the thing Sunday night, put it on an airplane, and give it to me Monday. And so he wrote the thing, and, you know, he just popped pills, stayed up for 2 solid days, and wrote the thing based on all of my story. And so we started shooting about 2 weeks later. But it was interesting the way I got, what the heck was his name? The actor from Godfather.
Yeah, Alex Rocco.
Alex Rocco. The way I got Alex Rocco, he was in Miami promoting The Godfather. And I hired him, and Paramount was paying all his per diem and everything. So I stole Alex Rocco from Paramount, paid everything, you know, except his salary. I paid. And interesting thing do you want to talk about Stanley now?
Yeah, let's talk about Stanley.
Interesting thing, you know, when he, at the end of the movie where the snakes come, he came up to me and he said, Grefé, I've been an actor for 10 years. I've never refused to do what a director tells me, but I am scared to death of snakes.
Yeah.
I said, no problem. I'll get some rubber snakes. I'll have you fight them. No problem. So I had 2 handlers, and they each had 2 snakes apiece, you know, hiding behind that barn. When he comes off the pool, I hit him with all of those snakes, you know. I mean,
did he think they were rubber snakes at first?
No, well, I had a couple of rubber snakes, but the rest I hit him with like 10 real snakes.
So he knew immediately.
He didn't know it, but the minute he hit the water and came up, I hit him with all these real snakes. And talk about panic. He really panicked, you know. And, you know, he won the Emmy. He was in New York on Good Morning America. And he said, have you ever done a movie that had any trouble with the director? And he says, there's this insane director in Florida that hit me with all these snakes, you know. And, you know, my daughter, Melanie, you know, Melanie is.
Yeah.
She was doing a movie with Alex Rocco, and he heard her name, and he said, are you related to William, hey, William Grefé? She says, yeah, he's my father. Get him on the phone. Grefé, you son of a bitch. So he was a good sport.
Was he like, was that like the last day of shooting with him? I mean, like, did you have to get another take of
Yeah,
his
that was
face?
good. Yeah, I'm wise enough not to do that in the middle.
Talk a little bit about Chris Robinson, who plays he plays the guy that, you know, is kind of like the,
Indian,
you
yeah.
know, yeah,
Yeah, Chris was 100% pro. He was
yeah,
terrific, absolute terrific. And he, you know, was really gun shy of those. Those were real rattlesnakes, you know.
yeah,
What we did is we cut their fangs off, you know, and sutured their mouth, you know,
yeah.
and they couldn't bite him. And but after 2 weeks of filming, I said to Frank, my animal trainer, I said, what the hell is that? They grow their fangs back. He was growing, the rattlesnake was growing the, you know, the fangs back.
Yeah.
And so it, anyway, we had to, you know, cut the fangs off again and all. But Chris was 100% pro. I mean, he was really great the way he worked with those. So I can't talk more about, you know, how I admired him.
Because when you, because yeah, so they would defang them, so you could pretty much pick them up, and they were pretty much harmless in some ways.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah.
I mean, if you, I mean, I don't think you could do that today. They would, the
Right.
animal rights would come after you. Like,
you know, I said, Stanley was almost, he should have been in the Screen Actors Guild. That damn snake took direction. I mean, I don't know if you remember the scene where Chris was in the boat with the outboard motor and Stanley climbed into the boat. I mean, he was supposed to climb into the boat and all of that, and he did one. And then where Stanley drags the canteen up to the graves there. I mean, the damn rattlesnake did everything.
Was a good actor.
I mean, it was amazing.
Better than the girl in the Hook generation.
Right.
I mean, it's just, I mean, that's so cool. I mean, yeah. I mean, if you could get them to like not bite you, I mean, they're, you know, it's pretty safe, you know, which is interesting. Yeah. And you had to, it was November, and the things comes out in like April 15th, because you want the drive-in stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was. See, what I tell young filmmakers was preparation is the key. So many young filmmakers, they fight to get the money. Oh God, got the money, let's make a movie. Every movie I ever made, like if I got the money, I wanted 6 to 8 weeks of preparation. I wanted every prop. I wanted everything organized. And the only movies I winged is I had to wing, you know,
Tar 2.
And I had a wing, but I, you know, I had the experience, the wing it, you know. But all the other movies I made, I always wanted, you know, a lot of 6 weeks prep and get everything organized and make sure, you know, you had all the props and the costumes and everything.
Can you talk a little bit about your preparation, about how you would start? How would you go about, you know, preparing? Would you start with just shots, or?
Well, first you go through it, you see all the props you need, you know, and like, you know, I've seen some movies where you're supposed to have champagne, and they forget to buy the bottle of champagne, and it's held up.
Yeah.
And so first you go through all your props and have all the props, in the prop box ready, so you got every prop. If it calls for a gun or something, you got to see what kind of gun you're going to have, and how
Yeah.
like this thing with Alex Baldwin, that should have never happened.
I know.
See, but my belief on that, I know that gun real well. Alex Baldwin,
Yeah.
that gun is what's called a single action, which you cock it
Yeah.
and pull the trigger. But if you just pull the trigger, it won't fire. It's not a double action, it's single.
Yeah.
You've seen Clint Eastwood where he fans a gun.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know for a fact, but my belief is what happened is he
It's already a cock.
but before you get all the way back and it clicks, if you release that hammer, it will fire.
Yeah.
Just like Clint Eastwood goes like that, And I think he pulled that hammer back because he said, I never pulled the trigger. Well, you don't have to pull the trigger. So when you pull that hammer back, boom. Well, I don't know that for a fact, but I just think that's what happened.
So you're saying that the hammer, pulling the hammer back, and then him just releasing the hammer will pull it. It will fire. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. See, you pull the hammer back and it clicks. And once it clicks, then you can pull the trigger. But if you pull the thing back and not click and release it, it will fire. So that's the way you've seen them do that, a gunfighter.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
You just fan that thing like that. See, and it never clicks, so you don't even have to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
So I think that's what happened. Yeah, I don't know for a fact.
Do you think because now we're getting into kind of like the preparation of a film. Do you think it's a generational thing? Why because you're kind of alluding to the fact that a lot of young filmmakers don't do enough preparation. They kind of want to wing it because, like you said, they fight to get the money. They get the money and then they want to just shoot immediately without having thought of the shots, and then they're going to go over budget. Do you think it's a generational thing because you came from?
Yeah. I think. I mean, right now, I don't know if you saw on YouTube, I did that thing, a little 7-minute thing called Thumbs. Did you ever see that?
No.
You go to YouTube and type in Thumbs, William Grefé.
Thumbs.
And I just did a 7-minute thing a couple of years ago about, it ends up a horror thing, but it's my takeoff on the young generation. I mean, it drives me crazy when you go to a restaurant and like I saw this young couple with their 2 kids and all 4 of them are on their cell phones. They live on their cell phones, and it's I mean, just like in that 7-minute thing I did, I quote Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein said, "I am in fear that coming technology will make the human race a bunch of idiots."
Well, look at what we're seeing now with AI, and now you don't even have to write the paper; it'll just have a machine write it. It's like it's a scary time we're living in, and
And another thing that drives me crazy, if you look at movies now, in editing it, like a fight scene, everything is fast cuts, fast cuts, fast cuts, fast cuts, And and you can hardly tell who's doing what. But I mean, you look at Gunga Din, like the fighting scenes in that, you can see what's going on. But I mean, with fast cuts, an idiot, a chimpanzee could direct those things. But you look at any of John Frankenheimer's films with the blocking and and stuff. It takes a real director to.
Or look at like a touch of evil, that long shot in the film. I mean, like you couldn't wing that.
I mean, that was amazing the way they did that with huge cameras and all that.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, those cameras were super heavy, and like you said, you're using film. Even if you have a lot of money, you got to get a lot of film to do. It's not the same. That's why I think in some ways, now anybody can make a movie, but like to do it like when you were doing it, you did have to know what you're doing, because if you didn't know what you were doing, you would might shoot it backwards or not hit the right speed, and it would be like unwatchable. It just
right. And see, another thing too is you never knew what you shot till the next day. You had to send it in, get it developed, and so something.
There's kind of no excuse for it to be bad today, because it's like you have all the advantages that the previous generation did not have. You can see it right after you shoot it. I mean, you can hear the sound. I mean, it's like the only thing, but I think you get to the heart of it is the pre-production. A lot of them like to, skimp on that. And it's like when you get that, it's like you need to know what you're going to shoot every day, or you're going to fall over budget. You need to be in line.
Yeah,
it's best to be ahead of budget.
That 7-month deal, Melanie, just with the first AD on, Manhunt, 170 people in the crew. Let some of these guys try and make a movie with 3 people.
They wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't be able to do it with the limitations you had. I mean,
most of my films, I had maybe 8 or 10 people on the crew, and sometimes we'd lie, to make titles to make it look like we had more people in the credits.
We got Paul Fred here.
So
Joe John in the
Okay, that about does it for this interview. I want to thank William Grefé. Also, please check out Kim Houston Acting Studios. As always, you can find me at Justin Yachts. Please like, share, and subscribe, and check out the YouTube version of this. And I will see you next time on the DMF.